So, as Jacinta said, I am Katie. I'm also known as Glazant on the internet. You may remember these slides from yesterday. I had 5 minutes then, I have half an hour now, so I will be speaking slower and breathing. It will be great. I work in developer relations, which is a fancy name for engineers that go out into the real world and talk to humans. Well, we did, and then this thing happened. But I have been paid to give talks before, and now I would like you to get some of my knowledge for free. In my role, I have to give a lot of presentations, and hopefully by the end of this, you might be interested in giving a presentation yourself. And if yesterday was any consolation, this one will be a little bit more detailed. I will have time this time to answer questions at the end, either during while we're recording, hello people online, or afterwards in the hallway, or during the sprints, or on Discord, or by messenger pigeon. That is fine. The very first thing I have to say about giving a presentation is that you might freak out. Are you worried about the idea of having to stand up in front of a crowd and speaking? On purpose? Here's the secret, everyone freaks out. Even the most experienced speakers get butterflies before an event. Giving a presentation in front of a crowd is intimidating. You are literally the center of attention, all the lights and eyes are on you. Facing an audience of any size can be very vulnerable. But once you get going, get through the first 10-15 seconds of your speaking, you start to become the star of the show, and you can deliver your amazing message. But what if they hate my talk, you might think? Here's one thing to remember. People came to your talk for a reason, not to see you crash and burn, but to learn something from you. It's easy to let the panic of potential disappointment get the better of you, to mess up your demo, to misspeak or lose your place or repeat yourself or lose your place and repeat yourself, but your audience won't care about that. They will see your talk as successful if they leave having learned something. People are going to remember your talk for you, not necessarily your slides. Slides are a mechanism to help you tell your story and reinforce the points you want to make and help guide your content. You could give a presentation on the most important thing in the world, but if you deliver it flatly in a monotone voice and are being uninterested, then people won't be interested in what you have to say. You can give a talk without slides, but you can't give a talk without talking, except for that one time when the person had a deck that was all just chicken, 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 chicken. But I'm not a lecturer. I'm not teaching. In a way, you are, though. There are two things that people can take away after leaving your talk. They will learn something they didn't already know, or they are reinforced with something they already knew. By hearing you present it, it validates their perception on the same topic. And now, the most important thing about presenting to an audience, they do not care what you did. You wrote 1 million lines of code in a month. Pfft. You create widgets that help synergize the fiscal prudencies at FUBARConf. Bah. They care about why. Why did you do the thing? Our users were having issues with reliability on our platform, so we introduced a new type of testing strategy to help validate deployments. We were never going to solve our rapidly scaling problem, so we created a code generator that spat out millions of lines that solved our problem and kept our users happy. The why is what gets you out of bed in the morning. You don't go to work to code, you go to work to solve problems. What you made isn't as important as how you made it. There is a long tradition of storytelling in human society, from ghost stories to fairy tales, morality plays, and TED Talks. There's entertainment in a story, but there's lessons there too. It's great to hear an amazing orator, or even better for especially technical presentations. It is essential to additionally have a takeaway. How did you do the thing? How can people try your thing out at their desk on Monday morning? One of my pet peeves is going to a technical presentation, seeing this amazing new thing, and not knowing how I can try the thing myself. Your talk needs to have a call to action. Try this thing, consider using X, read my blog, learn about this project, find out more. You could condense that call to action in a tweet or a blog post, but there is power in a story and the journey. And to give a presentation, you need a stage. But here's the thing. This is a conference. They have an open CFP. You could present a talk at this next year. There is an entirely separate series of talks I could give about how to market yourself as a speaker, how to write a proposal for an event, what events are out there. But there is this conference. There was lightning talks open earlier. There are going to be other talks and conferences in the future. But once you have your idea and a potential event you're aiming for, you now need to bring the content, which brings me to slides. You do not have to have them, but I like to have them. They are very important for keeping me on track, because otherwise I would end up talking forever. One time my audience didn't notice that my slides weren't progressing because my talk kept going on like it was intentional, but it wasn't. Fun times. Now we get to the part of the presentation where I'm going to be making suggestions at you. These are opinions guided based on my own experience, but also some pretty well-done guidelines, but also the wisdom of some sages and mentors that I've had over the years. If you already have opinions and things that work for you, great, go do that. But if you're just starting out, here are some common best practices. These are generally suited towards technical presentations at meetups or other community events. Outside of those venues, your mileage may vary. Do not try to do these at like a scientific conference. You may not get as much benefit out of them. Also, a kind reminder, if you notice anyone at this event who hasn't given a talk yet or has given a talk already doing things differently to what I say, do not call them out on it. If you are in the room and you have not yet presented, do not edit your slides to suit what I'm going to say. Please. You don't want to do that. You will be better suited if you take these in mind for next time. Some things to do. These slides are in green because they are the good things. On average, aim for about a slide a minute, maybe 3 if you're feeling cheeky, or yesterday this was 60 slides in 5 minutes. Don't do that unless you're experienced. You do not want your slides to be distracting where it sounds like you're going tick, 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 all the time when you've got a clicker. Your audience wants to hear you speak, not the repeated mouse click. Your slides are signposts for your story. Depending on the story you want to tell, you may want to give yourself some breathing room to expand based on the audience. So think of your slides more as guardrails. Pick the one thing you want people to remember after your talk. For your presentation, this might be, I did a thing, or learn this one weird trick. You will be presenting for some time, and people will not remember your entire presentation word for word, so they can only take away a subset of your talk. So make sure your point is memorable. Is it a link to a package or a tool? Maybe have the name of the thing on a slide. And if it's something you want them to go to, like a URL, put a QR code or the URL on your last slide. Invite people to take pictures. Make sure that slide is up for moments so that people can take pictures. Toot about it afterwards. Make sure that people can follow your call to action. Do not assume the prior knowledge or technical knowledge of your audience. Try to avoid the curse of knowledge. Let's say you want to give a presentation at work about what you're building. You know everything about it. Your manager probably knows a lot about it as well. People outside your team may know a lot about it, but as that circle grows, so the knowledge is lost. You need to keep your audience on track with what you're doing, so you're going to need to fill them in. And you need to fit the audience. If you're presenting at a meetup, it can be a lot more casual to, say, an industry event. But also think about the people in the room. A room of programmers are probably going to know basically what the GIL is or have seen a talk where the GIL has been described at length. But that being said, if you know the general scope of your audience but not their proficiency, take a moment to bring some of the newer members of your audience up to speed on the base concepts that you'll be expanding on later. You may be presenting the same content at different events, but you should make sure it fits the people in the room. These are literally the same slides from my lightning talk yesterday. These are also the same slides that I give internally at work to interns who are building presentations about their projects. Only the speaker notes have been changed. Yes, only the speaker notes and the jokes have been changed, yes. Use images to help people visualize what you're saying where appropriate. You can overdo this, but you have all this space, so much room for activities. Earlier I had more visual aids in my opening. Here I'm using words, but I'm also giving a professional skills talk. If this was an engineering talk, there might be a slide of code. Speaking of engineering, if you have something you want to show, show it. Do the demo. It's always a good idea to show and not tell. It is also a good idea to have a backup recording just in case, and making these backup recordings can help you practice your demo. If you're going to be putting words on the screen, adjust your text to use as few words as possible. People are going to read whatever you show on the slide. This is known as foreshadowing. One thing that people will not be able to see are your speaker notes. Speaker notes are super helpful to help you remember what you want to say at a particular time. You can do full transcripts or bullet points, whatever will help you remember what you want to say. And if you find these slides online afterwards, there's a little secret hidden message in my speaker notes right now that you will have to find yourself. And you got to practice your talk. This is the bit that I hate the most, but you got to practice your talk. I know it sucks, but you got to practice, and you got to time it. If you're speaking for 30 minutes, is that 30 slides? Is it 45 slides? You won't know until you've timed it. And you got to practice. Again, I'm sorry, it sucks. You have to know what works and what doesn't for you. It also helps to make sure that you don't have any accidental tongue twisters, that your flow works, and that you have at least tried to say the words out loud before you say them out loud in front of other humans. But you do not have to be speaking the entire time either. Use pauses after important points to help them sink in. There is a difference between breathing and taking breaks between content. It is useful to continue to breathe during your presentation, something I should have done yesterday. I like to make sure I have a drink on stage and reminders to drink. Speaking of section breaks, these are some specific things to avoid. These are in red. Do not do these things. Avoid walls of text on a slide. This is a perfect example because none of you are listening to what I'm saying right now. You're trying to read all of this. Walls of text like this are distracting because they are going to be read faster by your audience than you could ever speak them. If I could add a feature to all slide software, it would be a little pop-up that says, "Hi, it looks like you've accidentally added your speaker notes to your slide. Let me help you move that." A lot of times when you see blocks of words, it's stuff that's important, but it could also be used in a different context. You are on a stage, you have been selected to speak. You do not need to validate why you are in front of your audience to your audience and take up 5 minutes of your valuable 30 minutes you have to speak. And it also goes into the what that doesn't matter. It's the why and the how. I could have spent the first 5 minutes telling you all about my entire long history in open source and whatever, but also I was introduced very succinctly with some of the top level stuff. You only have a limited time and you want to respect your audience, so get to the stuff that matters. And if you have less words on the screen, it means that you can make sure that they are visible. The old adage would be, can you see everything on the slides from the back of the room? Nowadays, that plus, can you read these slides on Zoom over a 3G connection on a mobile phone? For reference, apart from this slide, no text on this deck is smaller than 20 point. If you have a demo, do not fake it, we can tell. It is very easy to spot a fake. And if your demo crashes, it proves you're really doing it, and your audience will empathize with you. One of the best talks I've ever seen had a demo that went sideways after the speaker, having already gone through hours of AV problems, was presenting on the second available borrowed laptop with live debugging with the audience. The interaction and everything that went on made it one of the best presentations I've ever seen. It was also a talk about having to write a virus, and the second borrowed laptop was immediately reset and wiped afterwards. I've also given a talk where my code samples intentionally work on my machine but fails when I try to put it up to the cloud. It's a talk about debugging, about the narrative is around seeing that error happen, getting really confused, and then following that error through the system to work out how to debug it. But it's really important to practice to know that I will intentionally getting the specific bug I want and not every other possible bug. Again, this is all based on if what you're talking about has the ability to have a demo. Do not use memes. Does anyone know what this is? If anyone wants to throw up their hand if they know the context of this. There is one hand. This is the unpopular opinion puffin. This is a meme that people use when they have an unpopular opinion. If you did not know that, you would have been highly confused until I referenced it. They distract people from your content. It all goes back to the assumption thing. Memes make sense to the people that know memes, but if people aren't up to date with the latest memes, if they've dropped off of social media because every social media platform is on fire, or they don't get the underlying reference, then you have things on your slides that are actively going to distract and confuse your audience. The same goes with animations or GIFs or GIFs. Anything you have on a slide is going to draw attention, so what do you want your audience to focus on? You or the animation? Even if it's not a meme, having things like a cute cat picture might help you brighten your deck, but it won't provide any substance unless you want to go meta and have cat pictures as part of your demo input. I have gotten away with that once and only once. Do not read your slides out loud. That's what blog posts are for. You are on stage. You're allowed to perform. If you read from a script, you can end up sounding monotone, having read only the words you prepared earlier, but do not adapt to your audience. You can be monotone and you can be perceived as nothing more than a text-to-speech program, beep boop. Now, even though you should be performing, there is such a thing as overdoing it. If you are co-presenting, do not try to fake banter between yourselves. It is really hard to pull off. If you're presenting with someone else, there are better ways to be able to hand over between each other. It can be a single word. An inflection, it could be nothing because you've practiced and you know exactly when your changeovers are. I have a workshop that I give where we share different ways to respond to problems. And one of the specific parts of it is noted as a pantomime, but it's 40 minutes into an hour-long workshop, so it's a good time to get a little bit silly and bring up the energy in an otherwise very important customer-facing presentation. It helps bring up the energy before the final stretch, but it's also a good example of some of our concepts in practice. And it's always really well rehearsed. Well, it's always rehearsed. Well, speaking of things that are awkward, you do not have to take questions live. Set your expectations with the audience on how you want to interact. Answering potentially complex questions on the fly in front of a crowd is a completely different set of skills to giving a presentation based on prepared content. Some speakers invite the raising of hands throughout, but they are capable of handling that. If you want to make sure you can do your entire talk without having to suddenly break flow, just go and do your talk. You don't have to call it out specifically, but if you do get a hand raised, a simple "I'll answer questions later, thank you" will suffice. And depending on the event you're speaking at, you may also get asked before you get on stage if you do want to have a live Q&A. And it's okay to say no. It's a real skill to be able to be bombarded with potentially interesting and complicated questions on the fly. The one thing I don't miss from pre-pandemic in-person events were those people who thought they were very clever trying to trick the presenter with questions, trying to prove that they knew more than the presenter. Or people that go, "I have a question, it's actually more of a comment." As an attendee, it's good to ask questions that will help clarify something if you are literally needing clarification, or to help highlight the speaker's work. This is very good, but also, you have only heard 30 minutes of what the speaker has to say. It is entirely possible they know a whole bunch more that they couldn't fit into their presentation. They would love to chat with you in the hallway afterwards. In the hallway afterwards is more of a short thing of, let us go and have this conversation later when we're not recording and taking everyone else's time. I actively want to talk to you, but let us change the context in which we talk. It makes it more comfortable for everyone involved. Don't use TLAs. They can be extremely distracting when used without context. TLAs are 3-letter acronyms. They suck at the best of times, but again, it harks back to audience presumptions. A Python audience may know that GIL stands for global something, but people don't know your acronyms unless you tell them. If you need to use acronyms, introduce the term at the start of your presentation with the full term, and then the acronym. Teach people how to pronounce your acronym. Is it GIF or GIF? And then If anything else, you've told your audience about the acronym. But Katie, I hear you lament, it's just too hard, there's so much to do. Well, yes, you cannot make a 15-minute presentation in 15 minutes, more like 15 hours. You have to set aside time to prepare your talk. You have to set aside time to practice your talk, and this all takes time. There's a really bad trope of speakers finishing their talk the night before or writing it on the plane. Planes are these things that we used to use to be able to... Anyway, I used to try to make sure that my slides were ready and locked before I even started traveling to an event. For complex topics, there are always going to be things you want to add, but it's better to ensure that you don't change things last minute. For example, if you are speaking later today or soon, don't change your slides based on what you're learning now. That is a thing that I have done before and it cost me dearly. Some speakers can pull this off, but if you're just getting started, you do not have their preparation and practice. But Katie, what if my presentation is boring? People have chosen to attend your talk to hear what you have to say, but you are never going to enrapture 100% of the audience. I apologize if you are currently looking at your phones or laptops. I'm not speaking directly at you, I'm reading from my notes. You can only speak to those people who are engaged. If, say, on a video call, you notice that someone isn't paying attention, there could be any number of reasons. They might be taking notes. They might be responding to something just out of view. They may have forgotten to go camera off. In an in-person audience, that person might be trying to sort out some problems happening at the conference, happening at home, or they might be taking notes, or they might be playing Baldur's Gate streaming from their Stream Deck or something. But there are always going to be people that aren't going to give the energy back that you're giving, but focus on those people who are, those who are nodding along, those who are giving eye contact. Find those people in the audience and talk to them. But Katie, I don't know what to say. You always have something to say. How many people in this room right now have a co-worker in the audience? Okay, that's 2 hands. Everyone else has a different employer, so that is literally an entire job's worth of differences that you have. Your experience is unique, and you have a different why you need to share, but you may end up using the same tools. Multiple people in the room may use PyTest or Unitest, may use Playwright, may use any number of things, but the way you're using them is going to be different. If you do work together, if you work on separate teams, you work on different things. Maybe there's some weird trick that you want to share internally. That is something you could talk about. Oh, but if you mean I don't know how to make the words into the slides, well, let me help you with an easy 8-step plan for how to write your next presentation. Pick your main point. What is the thing you want to get across? Sorting all my socks was wasting time, so I fixed it by buying all of the same. Memory leaks made our product unusable, so we did X about it. Step 2, make a rough outline. It could be something like, introduce yourself and frame what you're going to say, share your motivation, your why, how did you solve the thing, have a demo, optional, extra things you did, what you learned by working on this problem, things that you found could be useful for your audience, and a call to action, a link, a takeaway. This is just a starting point, but it helps you to build a structure around the content you want to present. Next, write a script. Put your thoughts down. Make the words into paragraphs, into blocks, and then start putting those together into a script. This helps you to give something to read from as you practice, but it also helps you formulate what works and what doesn't. But much like a rough draft may not be used, you may not use your full written script in your final presentation. This is all preparation. Take that script and now slice it up into things that make sense. You may want to swap these things around where you want to have a continuous narrative. But once you start chopping these things up, you start to see that they form things that look like, oh, this could be a slide. And then you can put those slides together and you can make visuals to map with those slides. And then you've got to read it out loud to someone else if possible, but a plushie also counts. You really got to practice and get those tongue twisters out. You'll start to get the cadence happening, work out what you like and what you don't like, and you can start to perform your content instead of just reciting it. And you got to time it. Use a stopwatch, either on your slides app or on your phone. Go through it at a normal pace. If you have a co-presenter, go through it together. I find that when I present a new talk, I end up speaking much faster in person than when I practice. But that's okay. Ending early is fine. Going over is not. It is worse, the worst thing at all in the audience to have a talk that's going long and making you miss another talk. People have committed the half hour of time for you, and they have other things to do. So if you start late or have technical problems, try to adapt, listen to the organizers. If they say you have 30 minutes from now, that's fine. And again, you've got to practice. If you were telling a story at a party, you wouldn't need to. But you also aren't expected to give a half-hour polished monologue at a party. With a presentation, you're giving focused technical content within a fixed time with accompanying visuals. Practice to ensure you finish within the time to respect your audience. I found success with my practices to record myself with the intention of sharing it to someone else, but never really do. And that's pretty much all I had, except you've seen this fake out before, because wait, one more thing. You are not Steve Jobs and neither am I. There is no one more thing. This is a callback to the time that Steve Jobs finished an Apple keynote and then in the encore introduced the iPhone. You might be tempted to copy this or other signature moves from other professional orators. They have hundreds of presentations under their belt. They've practiced and workshopped and marketed and have their style down. If you try and copy this, chances are you'll come across as lame, or whatever the cool kids say now. Dank? I don't know. You can give a good presentation without a gimmick, without prizes, without slang, without trying to match with the cool kids, by just being you. Your audience wants you to succeed. They want to learn from you. They are your allies in this, and they are really happy that it's you on stage right now and not them. Just be you and all else will follow. You've got this. That is actually the end of my slides. Thank you very much. There is references on the link on the slide right now, glasnt.com/talks. And do we have time for questions?
2 minutes for questions.
Yay! Does anyone have a question? I am glad I was able to cover everything thoroughly. No, one question.
Hello, Katie.
Hello.
So you talked about talking to the people in the audience who are engaged. My question is, do you have a favorite technique for re-engaging an audience if the energy starts to feel a little low?
Did you notice maybe the 2 times I did this throughout my talk where I asked people to raise their hands? That's really good. A introverted audience like at a technical conference may not interact. I have tried to get people to do a sing-along before in New Zealand. That went over just as well as you might think. One thing I do have done on occasion is plant people in the audience and have them be the people who interact at the opportune times. Unfortunately, because this was such a late scheduled thing, I couldn't have my normal cheer squad up the front, but this is something you could also do. It's also super fun to have like people you care about, right? Like in these 2 seats right there, and you just talk to them. I mean, everyone else in the room is absolutely important, but when it's like people that you haven't seen for a year right there, and you're just like, hi, look at me, I'm doing a thing. It's very good.
Any other questions?
I'm also more than happy to talk about this any other time as well.
I have one question, which is, what was your first talk like?
Awful. My first talk was at a conference nearly 10 years ago. The recording is online. Please, for the love of God, do not watch it. My demo broke. I was trying to live debug on the fly. I didn't have a point, but I improved from that first time and was able to make my presentation better, more resilient. I gave it again and again. I started talking about other things. ... I ran a conference.
Okay, everyone, please help me thank Katie for her wonderful talk.